We are now officially through one full month of Disney Lorcana's first ever rotation. Core Constructed was shaken to its core. Haha, pun intended. But with that, a kind of just this grand scheme of how the format can be played, in my opinion, still up to debate. What are absolutely certain about the metagame is that Sapphire Amethyst is dominant. It has the best card pull, it has the best conversion rate, it's the most played deck, which kind of go one and the same if we're being honest. Like normally when you're the most played, you're also the most successful, like in terms of conversions. Kind of just how that happens, unless something really drastic happens. But Sapphire Amethyst definitely, in that field where we're saying, hey, this is the best deck. It's also kind of proven to being the best deck. Not only is it converting into several top 8s, it's also still converting into several wins, like this past weekend winning a 200 plus player tournament and getting a CCQ invite. But that's not the only thing that's certain about the format. The other thing that's certain is that it feels like any deck can win. Maybe not any deck, but this past weekend alone, we had 5 different decks win fairly large tournaments around the globe. So with that, not only is Sapphire Amethyst proving to be dominant, the Eagles are 4-0, and let's break into the meta report. So here we are this past weekend. Asuka was able to pick up the win at the CCQ in Stockholm. This was a 128 player tournament. I watched the majority of this when I could. It started around 4 a.m., so I think both days I got up around 7, and I was able to watch the tournament conclude and begin. Shout out to a lot of my friends that were out the tournament here. Zan went out to this event. He was able to go undefeated day 1, finish in the top 32, lose in top 32. Shout out to TFM Ben, TFM Melissa. They also traveled across the pond for this one, both ending up in top 32 as well. This is a deck that, Amethyst Steel is one of those decks that we've been covering forever. It's our first guide. It's our second, committed deck guide as well. And this is a pretty run-of-the-mill list here. There's nothing crazy about this deck. There's just a bunch of fundamental choices. And what I will say about this particular deck and the archetype of Amethyst Steel kind of like within the metagame is that it's all about positioning. That's the key factor here, is that when this deck is positioned well, it can be successful. What I will really give credit to here in this particular run by Asuka is really, really simple. In top 32, she played against Sapphire Amethyst on the play and won. In top 16, she played against Sapphire Amethyst on the play and won. In top 8, she played against Sapphire Amethyst on the draw and won. This is the matchup that everyone is saying is a problem. Everyone's kind of agreeing that like this is the type of deck that if you're going to play it, it's really difficult to understand that you're very good in the metagame, but if the most played deck and the most successful deck is Sapphire Amethyst, it's really difficult to register this deck. Well, Asuka didn't care, and it paid off. Beating not 1, not 2, but 3 Sapphire Amethyst decks in the top 32, to me, is enough proof alone that this deck should not be counted out just yet. There clearly is like a will into the way type conspiracy here. And I think that one of the cards it comes down to is White Roses. This is a card that we targeted very, very early. There's in the Metafy guide, we have a kind of a podcast between me and myself and Melissa. And with that podcast, we discussed what you needed to be successful in some of those matchups. And the core was it Cobra and White Rose gaining that extra bit of lore was really, really like this break point in the Sapphire Amethyst matchups if you can hit it. The other real big break point here is Madame Mim Tiny Adversary. Skater Mim is a very good card in the metagame right now. We're back to 0-4s and 1-4s all over the place and 0-3s and things like that. And now all of a sudden getting this 4 strength is really making the difference in these uptick of Amber Steel play. And of course, Amethyst Steel is still on the waiver there. Now, Cherna Dogs or Chroma Dogs, as you might want to call it now, is making, kind of this entry level into the metagame as well. And all of a sudden, Tiny Adversary is just changing all the math, and it's making it very problematic for cards. When you start looking at this deck and you're like, wow, Captain Hook has 4 strength, Calhoun has 4 strength, Jafar has 4 strength, White Rose 4 strength, Genie 4 strength, this Jafar 4 strength, even this Dumbo 4 strength. Like, when all of these cards start going above and beyond curve, it really starts to make Tiny Adversary look that much more powerful, and it's standing out in a big way. This deck, of course, having 3 Hypnotic Strike and 4 Strength of Raging Fire. I think that this was just very, very well tuned for this particular metagame, and it paid off. You know, having the ability to still play Palace Guard as a 1/4 when you play cards like Hypnotic Strength and Madam Mim, all of a sudden, you know, you can get your Palace Guard up to a 4 Strength character that removes a character and still in play. It's still in board. The most interesting thing about this list, my favorite card in the format, is Bell. Missing. Not even here. We just don't care. Like, I think that this is a really, really well-designed list. I think there's a lot to be taken away from this deck, and it really is just kind of creating those choices again. Like, when we're talking about going into these final days and these final events, leading up to DLC Bologna, leading up to set championships, you really should be looking at the most successful decks. At the end of the day, 128-player tournament, beat Sapphire Amethyst 3 times in Top Cut. I think there's some stuff here, guys. You should be looking into it. If you're an Amethyst Steel player, this is right here. We're going to be covering it a little bit more at full length in the, our guide on Metafy. So if you want to hear more about this list specifically, go check out that guide on Metafy. But all in all, huge shout out to Asuka picking up a big victory, getting that, that European invite, which is kind of incredible. Right now, there's 2 European invites. This is the first one that got it. We're going to check out the second deck in a second here, but huge congrats to you. And with that, let's keep going forward. The other wonderful victory this past weekend was by Victor picking up the 270-player victory at the CCQ. This event was hit by a Sapphire Amethyst mirror in the finals, so either way we were going to get a win for Sapphire Amethyst. And honestly, when you start looking at these decks, you really, this is the biggest key factors for me, is look at where we are at now. If we actually just quickly take a full look at this deck so you guys can see the amount of choice going on in this, you can see that's 3 lines of cards. There's lots of 2-ofs. There's lots of different interesting choices and picking points, because what's really being identified in these decks is that you have this kind of amount of card draw along with this amount of card selection that you get to make these like definitive choices if you're educated in the format. And I think that that's the big takeaway here, is that this deck has clearly been educated. This player has probably played a ton of games. It's a 61 card deck, which I can respect a little bit, but at the same time, I'm sure if they could have got to 60, they would have. In my humble opinion, if they're, of the same knowledge for me, they're like, you know what, I can go to 60 or I can go to 61 and I can just play another draw card. And that's kind of what this seems like right here. We're split between Finders Keepers, Vision of the Future, and Develop Your Brain is like those choice selection cards. We also have 2 second star of the rights. So this is basically asking to do everything. Like in some games, we need second star of the right to win the mirror. We might need Finders Keepers to kind of come back in a game. We need it to be inkable, which is really, really important, because right now this deck has 11 uninkables. That's really noticeable. A lot of these decks are kind of hovering between 10 and 14. So getting to 11 is a good number. I like that number a bunch. 6 1-drops. Are we playing 6 1-drops? Are we playing 8 1-drops? Are we playing 5 1-drops? Like, what is that answer? I think that right now you're seeing this nice choice of just being, hey, I know that I have to respect the mirror, and because of that, I need to just hit my numbers. I can't be oversaturated into one matchup. And that's kind of what my tribute to this is that, like, if you think you're going to be playing aggro all day long, you should be playing 2 1-drop or like 8 1-drops. If you want to be more gamble and you want to just rely on the altar, respect to you. I think it's mostly correct because the altar is so good in this game. But now you have to be worried about kind of like multiple things of seeing your 1-drop and also still finding your ramp, because if you don't find your ramp, you're in a really bad place as well. So all in that, it's just kind of where we are. I love that we're still playing Iago. I think Iago is still one of those characters that are very misinformed. People believe that if, it gets a hypnotic strength, that you're in this bad position. But the real truth is that on average, if your opponent is hypnotic strengthing you, then they're not actually having a very good turn. And while paying 2 to remove a 4 cost is not great, it still means that like they're kind of still skipping their turn. So unless they very specifically have like a second ramp and hypnotic strength, then it's not a big deal. So I think that this card is still very well positioned in the metagame, even against steel. Like whatever 4 cost card you that isn't like exactly Scrooge McDuck or a character with ward like Kita that we've seen kind of pop up a bunch within the French events this weekend, then they're like the only ones that are really getting through that strength of Raging Fire. So aside from that, you still have to play a card, right? Like you have to put a 4-drop in play. And the upside, like the high risk, high reward aspect of Iago is so high that I think that it's actually just dramatically correct to be playing, and you should put it back in your deck if you take it out of your deck. Madam Mim Elephant was a card that broke out in kind of week 1, and here we are 4 weeks later still saying like Madam Mim is good enough. Again, 61 card deck, but 270 player event, pick up a CCQ win, kind of a big deal. TikTok, stats, like, right? We just love stats. This is what this deck is doing best. This deck is choosing it, and it's really making those selections known. It's playing the stats. It has the one of Elsa. It has Monstro. Now, Monstro is a card that a couple weeks ago, I think really made a big kind of like return to the metagame at Pro Play Games. This is a card that, you know, I heard lots of players say, oh yeah, I'm good, I'm going to win the game. And then their opponents like sing second star to the right, and play a Monstro, wipe the board, and then like still have 2 cards in their hand. And a lot of opponents are like, I did not see that coming. People weren't playing Monstro, but now they are. You can even go to the extent of playing the Monstro combo and have the Magic Feather in your deck and do all cool things like that. Shout out to Jeremy from, over on X, Mock Jeremy. He was talking about playing Mufasa in Sapphire Amethyst this weekend, and it was being successful. 4-9, kind of a big stat. It's a big boy. All right, big boy, guys. But seriously, I think that once again, the choices here are there, right? There's so many different cards that you can be utilizing in this metagame. Like, Sapphire Amethyst has the highest quality of card pull, and when you have that high quality of card pull, you get to be educated. You get to make, you know, really constructive choices in your deck building. And I think that the players that are really going in the nitty gritty and saying, these are the cards that I need to win in this matchup, and I will just want to give myself a chance in the matchup, I feel like they're going to be paid off. And I think that this is proof of it. It honestly is 100% proof. When you talk about having 1 Elsa, 2 Monstro, 2/2/2 for the develop, vision, finders keepers, 2 second star to the right, you know, even 2 TikToks, even go to that extent. Like, these are all choices that you're making to round out that 60 cards, or in this case, that 61 cards. I think the best Sapphire Amethyst decks are going to be played by the best players that are just going to utilize the altar to the best of their ability. They're going to be the most informed. They're going to know what they're going to need in every single matchup, and they're going to truly utilize the altar to kind of scope their tournament. 12-round tournaments at DLCs is a lot, and you need to give yourself the most opportunity to win the most games because the metagame is too diverse. So huge shout out to Victor. I love this deck list. I think it's a really good choice to kind of like scope what you might decide to play at a DLC and even at set championships. If you're the best player in your local area, then you should just play the best deck because you're probably going to beat everybody in the mirror anyway, and you want to have the opportunity to beat all the other random decks. I think this deck is just proving like, hey, you play a little bit of everything, you give yourself the opportunity to figure out every matchup, and you're going to win a lot of games. So if you're looking for set championships, and you're just looking to go out and win Maleficence week 1, like, just go play Sapphire Amethyst. I think it's the best deck, and it's probably not even, like, that close. Mikkel picked up the 2nd place finish at the CCQ in Stockholm this past weekend, playing Amber Steel Aggro. A huge shout out to Mikkel here. They said during the broadcast that this could have been a back-to-back victory for him in Stockholm. That'd have been really cool. You know, when you have a kind of a local community like that and these big tournaments, I did talk to Melissa a little bit, and she was saying that, you know, the Ravensburger organizer from the area, she literally knows all of her players. Like, that's actually insane to think of a community like this in Stockholm, so tight-knit, so close, having a player like Mikkel go and run it back and get to another finals in a major event is really showcasing his talents in that local community, and then having this idea that, like, we could really be successful with a smaller player base and having that much of a tight knit with Ravensburger. I think it sounds amazing because North America, I don't think we have that at all. So to me, it sounded really cool to hear that. But Mikkel here picking up that Amber Steel victory, and it was close. Honestly, there was a play in the event that I think Mikkel sat and thought about for about 2 or 3 minutes, to where the board was very wide. He had just played a second Tiana, and he was doing the math of trying to figure out, like, am I supposed to quest here? If I quest here, what happens? How much does the game get impact? Or my opponent has 1 card left in hand. If it's not Strength of a Raging Fire, then I think I have a real chance to just win the game. I think that these are the toughest decision points for this deck. Mikkel decided not to quest, and I firmly believe that that was correct. He ended up losing the game because Asuka, and she went Genie into dock, found the Strength of a Raging Fire off the dock, and then cleared the second Tiana, and we lost a little bit of lore that way. But I think truth be told is that, she had to find it. And I think Mikkel kind of played a 50-50 gamble. I don't really think that either decision was incorrect or correct. I think that at the end of the day, could have went either way. He really just said, you know what? You have to have this one specific card or I'm going to win the game. And, sometimes better to be lucky than good. Asuka found the card, put herself in the position to make the card worth it, and really ran away with the game. So I think that that's really cool. I think really interesting. If we're looking at this deck and like trying to figure out some of the newer things for it, the John Silver Ship's Cook is a card that comes up all the time. This is a card I played back all the way in the Azurite Sea metagame. It's a really powerful card. It's really good when going first. It's really interesting when going second because it actually like enables your Nala to kind of get ahead and get the lead a little bit and on like in specific things. Obviously, it's kind of like a bodyguard in itself, but it's a 3/3 body also that can sing when you need to. It also fights a little bit better when you need to than some of your other singers. Aside from that, this deck is pretty straightforward. 4 Fire the Cannons is really attributing to punishing all of the 1-cost characters in the Sapphire decks. I think that's a big deal there. It has a little bit of up-tempo in the mirror against Auroras and things like that if you're trying to prevent your opponent from going over the top and doing too many crazy things in the mirror. Other than that, this deck kind of pretty straightforward. It's really very reminiscent of what Sky played a few weeks ago to win the first CCQ in NA, and here you are seeing it again, that Amber Steel is just finding success in the metagame as a whole, and you kind of gotta love it. All right, so I did want to take a quick look at the metagame here from this past week. These were the top cut decks. So we had 21 Sapphire Amethyst, 10 Amber Steel, 6 Emerald Sapphire, 5 Emerald Amber, which were the dogs, 4 Amethyst Steel, 1 Emerald Steel, and 1 Ruby Amethyst. That's right, you can't count these decks out. The Rogue is still there. Ruby Amethyst finding a top 8 in this past weekend. We're going to look at that soon. And Emerald Steel finding a top 16 this past weekend. We're going to be looking at that deck as well. But all in all, you're seeing Sapphire Amethyst is the most consistent deck. There's just no debate about it. There's no argument. It's the most played deck, and it's converting well. Because as I said, it has the highest quality of cards. It has the best really just the best formula of winning games and kind of just like disrupting your opponent's games. So there's no doubt about that. Sapphire Amethyst is the best deck in the metagame. Amber Steel still picking up victories, still picking up top cuts. And now it's not just one player. We've seen success in small versions of like a specific player pool. I think this is very specific to dogs. A few weekends ago, dogs kind of came out, had 2 top 8s at the CCS Sunday tournament, and it was played by 2 great players. Ghosty, shout out to Ghosty, he's got a Metafy guy on it. Hit that up. If you want to learn about that deck, he has it covered. Go purchase it. You also had Diego that picked up an Emerald Sapphire or an Emerald Amber Dogs top 8. Then you went to a weekend with PPG where Dogs was very bad. It did not succeed. It wasn't really good, and it really wasn't good in any other tournament either. Then this past weekend, Dogs came out and not only had like 5 top cuts, but it also had a victory in a 78-player tournament. So now all of a sudden you start looking at this metagame and you're like, oh my god, like now there's a 5th deck that I have to worry about. And that's not even really discussing this Emerald Steel and this Ruby Amethyst that have maybe finally started to figure out what this decks are supposed to look like to also be successful. So all in all, I think the metagame right now, like yeah, we're looking at top cuts only, but when I tell you that the 5 decks right here on the top of this list all won a tournament, you have to understand that like the respect level for the amount of decks that can win a tournament is just continuously going up. One weekend, 5 different tournaments, all kind of there. And this is kind of what I'm talking about, right? Like I made a tweet this past weekend. Amber Steel won a 100+ player event. Amethyst Steel won a CCQ. Emerald Amethyst won a 5K. Emerald won a 5K, right? Like, and then of course, Sapphire Amethyst also won a CCQ, right? But like that's 5 different decks in one weekend of 60+ player tournaments around the globe, saying that any one of these decks can win a given tournament, which means one of 2 things. A, the DLC, in my opinion, is wide open. B, if you're a good player and you like one of these 5 decks, chances are you should just play the deck. I know that there's like, oh, this deck loses this metagame is shaped this way, we think there's going to be too much of this. Listen, Amethyst Steel has a bad Sapphire Amethyst matchup, but Asuka just went out and said, you know what, I don't care, I won top 32, top 16, top 8. I still won a CCQ with Amethyst Steel. Amber Steel is like, oh man, these other decks are kind of coming out, they're making it more difficult for me, Amethyst Steel can beat me, Emerald Sapphire might be able to beat me, what am I going to do? Doesn't matter. Won a CCQ this weekend. who cares, right? Like, didn't win a CCQ, sorry, won a 100+ player tournament. Sky again, going back to back. Again, shout out to Sky. He's been on an absolute tear. Top 8, win. That's pretty good. Tiago, he had a win, and a top 4, like with Amethyst Steel. Like, these players are obviously very, very successful in the metagame today, and they're kind of, the forefront of these decks being successful, but it's really just proof that if you put the time in, you put the work in, you put the effort in, you can position yourself to win games. Emerald Sapphire is really just kind of all over the place. This was the first win that it really got in a bigger tournament, but, a couple weekends ago, Jeremy picked up a top 4 with this deck. Zan went 5-2 or 7-2 with this deck. So, like, this deck has had, success over the last couple weeks. And then, of course, now Dogs coming out, winning a big event. Also, Habibi, shout out to Habibi, shout out to Pandemonium Heart. Like, they both played this deck to top 8s this weekend in larger tournaments. 100+ players. Habibi went back-to-back days with a top 8. We won an event that we're going to look at that deck shortly. So, like, all I'm really saying to you is with Chet Championships coming, any one of these decks is reasonable. Specifically, if you're good, if you're comfortable, you should play the deck you're most comfortable with at Set Championships. That's my humble opinion, is that this is living proof that any one of these decks can be successful by, honestly, any level of player, That's the craziest thing here about this metagame. That's why I think this metagame is phenomenal. And I didn't want to put the player on blast in the video here, but, like, that's why I strongly disagree with the opinion. This meta is actually incredible. All right, so here we are with Emerald Sapphire. Now, this deck is picking up a win. This was the Sunday tournament at the Lone Star event at Nexus. Shout out to 20 Lore Pro for the production again. As always, they do a wonderful job, so definitely shout out to those guys. But here we are. We're looking at what is Emerald Sapphire kind of developing into the last couple weeks. And, yeah, it's pretty run-of-the-mill. There's nothing that crazy about this deck at all. This is pretty much what Pandemonium Heart has been shouting out the last couple weekends. Shout out to his Metafied guide as well if you want to get a little bit more information on this type of style. I also think that Zan just released a Metafied guide, so if you're looking for all the information, then you have the ability. I'm a big advocate. If you want to learn, you should probably learn from the people putting in the work, putting in the effort, and maybe not everyone can showcase the results, but sometimes, by putting yourself out there, showcasing information, it gives the ability for other people to take it one step further. And I think that that's important. Specifically, if you're just trying to gain an edge and learn a little bit more, I think that it's always worth it to go out and get that information. This deck, I think it's pretty straightforward. There's nothing crazy here. To me, this deck comes down to one card. In all honesty, this is a deck that I've been very high on. I played it to 6-3 finish a few weeks ago at Ink. This is the whole deck. Clarabelle, Leonard Hooves. That's it. It's the whole deck. I'm just being real. Every single game you play, it is make or break on this card. Can I shift this card as early as possible in the game? And with it, can I draw like 4+ cards? That's it. That's literally the entire deck. There's this whole argument, this whole debate about what the rest of the deck looks like. And while, yes, it matters, right? Like, it certainly matters what we're playing. I just personally believe that this deck is so high roll on whether or not we get to play Clarabelle that kind of everything else is almost irrelevant. And I'm just being real. Like, yes, do I need John Silver? Absolutely. Do I think Basil is good? Absolutely. Do I think Hades is good? No, I don't. I actually think Hades is terrible. I don't really want to get into it right now, but personally, I think by removing this card from your deck, you actually make your deck better in pretty much every matchup. Yep, I know, hot take probably, but that's why we're here. That's because, it's just a fact. I think this card is actively bad, and I think if you think this card is good, then you probably are misrepresenting the matchups and how to play against certain matchups, and that's the biggest takeaway for me this weekend. In my own testing ground, we had a whole conversation about this card. I was able to explain to 8 other people why I think Hades is actually terrible in this deck, and I think I changed and swerved at least half of them that I was correct. We changed the deck a little bit, and all of a sudden we started really formulating the matchup in a way different way. And guess what? We were winning without Hades. And then the other guess what is that after about 10, 12, 13 games, I asked Sean, I said, hey, Sean, how do you feel about missing Hades? He goes like, no, haven't missed it one bit. So that's my opinion. You don't need this card. The other big deal here is no Pleakleys. I'm also team no Pleakley. Not a big fan. I think that it's this world that we live in, that we're like, oh, on the draw, I need to do this insane, ridiculous play so I can play a Clarabelle on turn 4. I mean, yeah, I'm not saying it's not fun to do, it's not cool to do, but how consistent is it to do? And like, should I really be relying on that level of play to make it happen? Not for me. Not for me. I'm just being honest. But all in all, I think that Emerald Sapphire is. I don't even know that it's really that well positioned, if I'm being completely honest. I think that if you love Clarabelle and you like this playstyle and you love Under the Sea, and you, for whatever reason, like Heads Held High, I actually think Heads Held High, I hate this card. I understand why you have to play it, but man, does this feel like one of those cards that you draw it and you're like, okay, I have it. Hopefully I draw Under the Sea. Like, you're just playing, you might, like, your hand might be 3 cards, but realistically, it's 2 cards, you know? Like, all this card does is make Under the Sea, like, a Singer 14. So, for me, I'm not a big fan of the Heads Held High at all. I respect it. I think that it is necessary in certain matchups, but, man, I thought this card was so bad this past weekend, and it only looks good when you can, like, really make Under the Sea just look insane. But I would argue that in most cases, Under the Sea is just good enough. So therefore, I'm not a fan of this either. But I will certainly still play an Inkable card in my deck. So there's that. Aside from that, John Silver, I think, is one of the best cards in the format. I think Baymax and Scrooge are both correct. I think 5/5s are good. I think stats are good. And that's really the big misconception about this deck. Donald Duck is the other one card that, like, listen, if I can't play Clarabelle, if I cannot get Clarabelle off, I need to do something. And Donald Duck, while it does fuel your opponent, it still kind of gives you the opportunity to draw the cards you need. Again, we're playing a bunch of combos, right? Like, the idea that we need both of these cards is a combo. The idea that we need You're Welcome plus Shift Clarabelle more often than not is a big deal. Finding multiple John Silvers is kind of a big deal. Like, finding multiple Basils is kind of a big deal. In this particular list, like, finding multiple Hades is also a big deal, but I still argue that this card is incorrect, and I would just utilize my Uninkables maybe a little bit differently. But yeah, all in all, a huge shout out, like, picking up a win. This was the first time that we can say, like, this deck won a tournament. I think that that's important to note, is that when you start finding those holes and finding those gaps, then you showcase proof of concept, and that's the real big deal, is how do you take the proof of concept? How do you make it more consistent? What do you do? And those are kind of the questions that I would leave off for right now with Sapphire Emerald in general. All right, so here we are with the Dogs. That's right. The Dogs picked up a win in a 78-player tournament. As I just said earlier, it also picked up top 8s at different events. There was 2 of these in the top 32 at Stockholm, played by Zan and played by TFM Melissa. So this weekend, Dogs had a pretty breakout weekend, considering the last few weekends it really hasn't done much. It has, had a little bit minor success in the side events of major events, but never really coming out and, like, picking up a really big weekend until this one. And it's a big weekend because Deal Sale Bologna is next weekend. Set Champs also starting next weekend. So when you start talking about having this 5th pillar of this metagame, kind of creating a star more or less than just the the square concept, that's a big deal, because now it just adds another layer of 2 things. One, adds a layer of choice. Can you play Dogs? Do you want to play Dogs? Where is Dogs' strong points? What are its weaknesses? These are questions you need to start asking yourself. The other thing is, it now says, hey, I have to probably respect this deck as well when making my considerable choices for Bologna and for Set Champions and things like that. As a whole, I think this deck is really cool. I think it's really interesting. I think it plays pretty great. And, these are the cards that make it really good. I think Emerald Chronicon is one of the cards that is so unique to the metagame. There simply, isn't enough answers to items. No one's really respecting them. So there's no real punishment to paying 3 and putting a Chronicon into play, because, like, no one is playing Benja. No one is playing Judy Hops, right? Like, no one's doing any of these things. It's kind of ridiculous. Clarabelle, hilariously, is the only true answer to that. So other Emerald decks that are playing Clarabelle have the answer to just, like, pay 3 and then banish the Emerald Chronicon, which even then doesn't even feel that horrible, if I'm being completely honest, because they paid 3 for a 1/2. So doesn't even feel that bad when it happens. Aside from that, this deck, I think Lewis, this card, it feels like another one of those real big swing cards. Is that early on, it was kind of discovered that Lewis was really, really good, and then everyone started playing Captain Hooks and Calhouns in every deck in the format, and then Lewis became unplayable. However, now the best and most successful Amber Steel decks are not playing Captain Hooks, and they're not playing Calhoun. And Dogs, they don't have a real good answer to this at all, except for, like, Tramp 2 that, like, buffs their character. So now, when you start playing Lewis, the like this card's gonna get you trades. Like this card answers Tiana, you know, like it says, hey, you better have a Strength of a Raging Fire or your Tiana is gone. It answers Daisy Duck. You might get 3 cards out of a Lewis in a format that Amber Steel is not playing Captain Hook and not playing Calhoun. So like this card all of a sudden stock rises real high. It's really, really good again. And I think that's like something notable going into your set championships and things like that, is there might be a few weeks where Lewis is really powerful again. I think Lilo had a coming back party this weekend. You know, this is another card that I think is always up and down. For me, the all-star of the weekend for my testing, I'm going to be doing a whole video just on my testing. Go-Go, yeah, this card is absolutely phenomenal. I won more games this weekend because of this card than any other card in the room. And yeah, this is just going to catch people off guard. If you're playing Emerald, I'm not even kidding. Like, even in Emerald Sapphire, I might consider playing Go-Go. Like, it's funny to think about, but it's kind of truthful that the amount of damage it gets left on and left around on the table, when you can randomly gain this like that amount of lore, it's kind of good. It's kind of good. I'm just saying, you know, Go-Go, do not, when you're doing your math at the end of the game, don't forget Go-Go. Really, really powerful. All in all, I'm always a huge advocate for the dogs. I think it is very well positioned. I think that you can play pretty well in Amber Steel because mostly that you have Under the Sea and Chromacon. Like, if you're ahead, if you ever get ahead in the matchup, Chromacon just prevents them from ever getting back in the game, if I'm being completely honest. It just makes their challenging almost impossible. And if you're ever behind and you can set up a board, Under the Sea kind of just comes in and does its thing, and that also really just might flip the Amber Steel matchup. This deck has the ability to go under Sapphire Amethyst. It has the ability to, go under the Emerald Sapphire decks because you have Ursula's protection. You know, you also have your own Under the Sea, so you can prevent them from, like, setting up a Sing as well, which is very relevant. So you're kind of just playing really well into the majority of the metagame. However, Amethyst Steel, probably not your favorite matchup. Probably don't want to see that one. The Mirror, a little bit skill dependent, a little bit luck, kind of all those things. You know, what's the real commitment to our uninkables here? You know, Chromacon is really big in the matchup. Under the Sea, also really big in the matchup. So I think that it took a little while for people to figure it out. It took a little while for the metagame to kind of like get to a position. I think, again, this deck, in similarity to the Amethyst Steel, it's all about positioning. So when you can get into positioning, then all of a sudden this deck starts looking really good. And this past weekend, I felt like it was its best position ever. We'll have to see if that remains true for Bologna. I think right now, would not shock me if this deck gets a lot more uptick in Bologna for sure. All right, let's talk about what everybody wants to talk about. Ruby Amethyst. Is it dead? Apparently not. Shout out to Alberto here, finishing in the top 8 and doing it in a very interesting manner. So here we are. We have 3 second star of the rights, 4 B King Undisputeds, and 3 Pirates Life because we're a shark deck. But not only, we do have Max Goof, the 3 cost 4/3 Singer 5. I just want to stay at home. This character can't move to locations. No big deal. We don't play locations. Who cares? I think that this is interesting. I also think we have Powerline. So we have Singer 4. We have a 3/2. Now, here's the question, guys. When we've seen Amber Steel decks now playing, I don't know, 4 Fire the Cannons, how easy is it to play this card on turn 2? Pretty difficult. Pretty difficult. But if we're playing in a metagame that doesn't have that, then, you know, this looks a bit more interesting. I will say that. I think Lumiere, also one of the best cards in the format. This card, if Ruby can find a way to maintain success, Lumiere really kind of does that. It really offsets all of the math for Under the Sea, which makes it very interesting. It also makes your combat much better, very similar to the Madame Mim, right? Like, even just Powerline becoming a 4/2 is relevant. That's enough to take out a Daisy Duck and sit around. Palace Guard and Mulan. Obviously, we also have the Shift Mulan here. This is a really interesting build. You know, we've seen mostly of the Flinger Dingers that people are calling it, and like all of the moving damage with Prince, with Panics and Bells and all that stuff, and then like the Prince John. And we've been seeing a lot of that concept. This is like a totally other side of the field here. Like Maui Shark is probably one of the best cards in the game in the format. There just isn't enough cards to kind of get away with it. So this commitment to 4 Big King Undisputeds and 3 second star to the right is very interesting because, if you ever get to just like exert 2 cards, draw 5 cards, gain a lore, and then like whenever you want, get the card back, that's pretty interesting. So I don't know. Obviously, I've not played a single game with this deck, but I did think it was cool because it was very different. I think in a particular type of metagame, interesting, right? Like, if this is all about Sapphire Amethyst and like how to beat Sapphire Amethyst, well, like if I can play more actions, like if I can draw way more cards in Sapphire Amethyst, then like maybe I have a chance, you know, like maybe that's kind of where this theory is coming from. Hard to be positive again, have not played a single deck with it, but I do like the idea that if Powerline lives, we get to be King Undisputed on 3. Like the idea that you can just like play a Mother Gothel, right? When this character, whenever one of your characters challenges, you may move up to 1 damage from chosen character to choose an opposing character, right? You can do things like that, which are cool, but like really what this deck is trying to do is just like establish a singer, establish a second singer, and then like just kind of like go from the game from there. And you still have all the good 4-drops, right? Like I talked about Iago earlier. Like Iago is just a good 4-cost character that like your opponent has to interact with. Otherwise, it just owns the board. Same thing's kind of going here. Like Iago plus Belle plus Elsa, Genie, and like you just have so many ways to draw cards. And now you're finally like, this is not Be Prepared. It is not Sisu, right? But Mulan has the ability to kind of interact to the board that way. And then playing 4 Be King Undisputeds with Shark has another way to like also interact with that. Like a lot of times Sapphire Amethyst is trying to build to a board that can sing second star to the right. And if you're able to just like exert your 2-cost character and say, no, let's get rid of one of those, like that's a pretty big deal. I think that like you can definitely have lines to where Iago's might take something out, you might Bell something else, and then all of a sudden your 2-cost can sing Be King Undisputed. And now you just wiped your opponent's board and you have 3 characters left in play. I don't think that that's that unrealistic to happen, and that's my guess as to where this deck was finding some success. So if you're a diehard Ruby Amethyst fan, hopefully this might give you something to mess with for set championships and things like that. I'm definitely not sold just yet that this is a DLC-worthy contender, but it's nice to see that there's life in the in combination. All right, last but certainly not least, we have Emerald Steel Aggro Con, right? Like this is a 3 Emerald Chronicon list. We got 3 Strength of a Raging Fire, 3 Fire the Cannons, and 2 Desperate Plans. And then there's a bunch of cards here that you might not recognize. Let's start with Fred. Fred is the 1-cost 1/1, 1 lore with How Cool Is That? Whenever this character is challenged, gain 2 lore, so that's just a lore gainer for you. You can see here we have 4, 8, 12, 14 1-cost characters. We have Banzai's back. We're not afraid of Rafiki. Who cares about Rafiki? And then we still also have Calhoun. Guys, I'm sorry. I meant to start with this. Yeah, there's 24 Uninkables in this deck. Yeah, there's 24. Yeah, 24 Uninkables in this deck. That's crazy. That is just like, whew. Top 16 finish at a CCQ. This was the number 32. He did play against Zan in top 32 and beat Zan with a deck with 24 Uninkables on the draw. That says a lot. I'm not saying that this is like it and this is like the deck, but when you start looking at this and you start taking a look at this breakdown and seeing like all these cards you're just not used to seeing, Fred, certainly not common. Banzai hasn't been relevant in quite some time. Prince Philip, certainly not a crazy relevant card. You know, like Desperate Plans, not a crazy relevant card. Like these are just things that are just different and interesting. And what I think is most important to talk about this is that here we are, 4 or 5 weeks into the metagame, and this deck found a way to finish in with top 16 at a CCQ. A few weekends ago, I believe his name is John. John found a way to go 6-3 at CCQ and 6-3 at PPG with a similar concept with Emerald Steel. And really what it's showcasing to me is that there could be life in this deck. There could be something here that we just need more people to figure out. And I think that that's really interesting for several layers of factors. One, we just saw that it took 4 weeks for the Chroma Dogs to come out and be successful. It's really just figuring out these other decks that are not so easy. They don't have the highest quality of card pool to be sure of what the best cards are. I look at a list like this, and you can see that it's all sorts of stuff, right? Like, again, we'll bring this up real quick just so we can get a full look at like what this image looks like. Again, this is 3 rows, all sorts of different numbers kind of laying around. Nothing is consistently there for sure, but it's really just showcasing like, hey, there's a lot of choice in the same combination. Do I think 24 Uninkables is absolutely insane? 100%. You really can't convince me that 24 Uninkables is correct. I feel like you're going to end up beating yourself more often than not. But what I will say is that, like, you know, we don't go above 3 ink. maybe it doesn't matter. Like, if we don't go above 3 ink, then maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it's okay. Maybe it's okay to run 24 Uninkables when there is nothing higher than 3. That might be totally reasonable. All in all, I think this deck is very interesting, very like different, which I think is good. And I think it just represents that, like, hey, we're not done yet. You know, like, there is still stuff to be found and still stuff to be discovered. And we haven't played in the biggest tournaments to date. At the end of the day, DLC Bologna will be the biggest tournament to date. 12 rounds. 12 rounds cut to a top 32. That's a large tournament. And if a deck like this can be discovered and be figured out, it might have a good run in a big tournament. Like, it's very possible that you just catch enough people off guard. A lot of people are going to come into this event and they're going to be so focused on the decks that they expect to see that if you are more informed than your opponent on the matchup, you might be able to steal some victories. And I think that's the biggest takeaway here, is that decks like this right now, if there's anybody that's been able to hide information, if there's a Sapphire Steel deck out there that really does exist, if there's an Emerald Steel deck there that really does exist, there's a Ruby Steel deck that's out there that really does exist. Even if it's not the most consistent deck, but if you have a plan and you figure it out and your opponent doesn't, that might give you a real large edge in these upcoming DLCs. Right now, we have Bologna, 2,000 players. We got Milwaukee in just a few weeks, also 2,000 plus players. Those are going to be the biggest, they're going to be the biggest events for this rotation format. And really just to settle everything before it's all said and done. I'm so very excited because a deck like this, like Ruby Amethyst, like Emerald Steel, even the Churna Dogs, or Chroma Dogs that came out this past weekend, they're showing that we're not done discovering things yet. And that's the biggest takeaway going in the DLC this weekend. If you're looking for some excitement, hopefully in Bologna it gets brought. I'm a huge advocate for these decks to find success. I'm hoping somebody figures it out. I'm hoping someone had the time to do it. I think it's really cool. It'll definitely be a big payoff for that person if they did figure that out. All in all, awesome month of Disney Lorcana. I think the rotation, I think it's healthy. I think it worked out. I think it's proven itself that if so many different decks can find wins in these larger events, while Sapphire Amethyst has been the most successful, most played, and things like that, Amber Steel has multiple victories. Amethyst Steel, multiple victories. Sapphire Amethyst, obviously multiple victories. But when Emerald Sapphire and Emerald Amber come out this past weekend, they pick up victories. It starts making things a little bit more interesting. When Ruby Amethyst is now finding top cuts, Emerald Steel is finding top cuts, and all those numbers are kind of like going and balancing a little bit more, it creates a very, very healthy looking metagame, and I'm super excited to play in Bologna next weekend if you're going to be there. This is my first time ever in Italy. I'm so excited to meet the community. Please come up, give me a hi, say hello, give me the hug. I'm a hugger. It's cool. I love warm hugs. Shout out to Olaf. It's going to be great. I'm looking forward to the travel. I'm looking forward to the fun. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching today. It has been a long month since I've hit record, but we got there today, got the meta report. I hope it is helpful for you. Good luck in set championships. Good luck in DLC Bologna, and we'll catch you next time.